get started, anybody who comes in won't be missing very much. I want to do a quick review. I'm sure you all know this and it's going to bore you to death, but that's why we're going to get it out of the way. Proper hand washing procedures. Super important, right? Tip number one that maybe you haven't heard is try to use warm water. Because if you use really cold water, it's really drying for your hands. If you have any cold in your body, which some of you I'm sure do, it will just increase that cold in your body. The warm water makes it much easier to get stuff off your hands. So warm water, at least 20 seconds of soap and lather, and moving your hands around, making sure you get under your fingernails, getting all the way up to your wrists, and then about 10 seconds of rinsing, which not everybody does. So just the quick scrub rinse isn't gonna do very much. Every time doing it that way. Tip number two I have about the hand washing, always moisturize your hands afterwards. So I brought some oils with me. I have some herbs and oils with me because I feel like these things are really important for you guys to have. If you don't already have something in place. If you have a lotion you like and you have a little tiny container you can take with you when you go places so you can also moisturize while you're out, great. If you don't, I have some oils that also have antimicrobial properties. They're not going to protect you 100% against everything, but it's going to be helpful to have things that have antimicrobial properties because they can increase your barrier. So you really...
Should you look for that in your soap also?
You know, really the action of the lathering for the 20 seconds with any soap, it's going to attach to anything that's on your hands, and then the rinsing for 10 seconds afterward is sufficient. So I don't recommend using the hand sanitizers if you can avoid them. If you can wash your hands instead, choose to wash your hands. The hand sanitizers are overwhelmingly going to be drying for your skin and are going to keep the stuff on your hands. So even if it's getting rid of 99.98% of things, there's still that 0.02% that's active, and it's still on your hands. It hasn't been washed off. So in every case that you can wash your hands instead of using the hand sanitizer, please do. And if you have to use hand sanitizer because there's no other option, go ahead and do it. But just be mindful of whether you're touching your face. You definitely want to avoid touching your face. Another really important thing about when you're going out in public that I don't know if this is being publicized as much is try to stay about 6 feet away from people if you can. 6 feet is about the distance that you need if somebody is just breathing, talking, so that you don't get any of their germs. If you're able to avoid going to some of the heavily trafficked areas, I know that they have the car that will take, the van that will take you to the stores, which is wonderful that they provide that. But if you're able to spend a couple of extra dollars to go online and have delivery come here, please do for right now. Just minimize your exposure. This is a really, really sensitive population here, as I'm sure you're all aware, and that's why I'm coming here. I'm gonna come again next week to talk about this because I feel like it's really critical that you guys are taking extra care of yourselves. I feel like I'm in a high-risk population being a healthcare provider, and so I'm taking herbs prophylactically, meaning I don't have any symptoms, I am not ill, and I don't know whether I'm coming into contact with people who are ill, but I'm assuming that I am. So I'm taking action against that right away. I'm also making her take action. My son was sick last week. We were both around him for a few days. That's why I didn't come in last week, because I didn't want to have to bring him a sick child with me to here. And we took herbs and he took herbs and everybody's fine. So these herbs really do work. They are really, really helpful, and I do feel like they would be great assets for you guys to have here if you're open to taking something multiple times a day, just to make sure you're minimizing your risk. If anybody ends up with symptoms, do you know what the first thing you need to do is?
Call your doctor.
Call your doctor is a great first step. You can also call the health department for Multnomah County. This is Multnomah County here, right? I know you're right on the board. It's Washington County. Okay, so you'd call the Washington County Health Department. There's also a lot of telemedicine. Is anybody familiar with telemedicine? Have you used any telemedicine? So basically like a remote, like a Skype appointment with a doctor. OHSU has a lot of telemedicine available right now, so I feel like that's a great asset for you guys, because if you are sick, the last place you want to be is in a doctor's office or an emergency room. Because number one, you're increasing the chances that you will encounter someone who is sick with the coronavirus, even if you're not. Perhaps you only have a cold or a flu, and you could increase your risk of exposure. And if you are sick with the coronavirus, you risk spreading it to a vulnerable population as well. So just to minimize and contain, having good hygiene and good boundaries, those things will keep you guys fairly safe. Does anybody have questions about what I've said so far? Yes?
How long does the virus live?
How long does it live? So inside the body or outside the body?
Outside.
Not very long outside the body. So the way that this is being transmitted primarily is through person-to-person contact. And we already have here in Oregon community spread, which means they don't know where each person is getting it from. It has spread so far that now it's being spread throughout the community. And I have felt this way already for a couple of weeks just because of where the cases came up when they did come up and what I was already seeing in my clinic. I think that there's a lot of undiagnosed coronavirus that's already been here for over a month because people are just thinking that it's a cold or the flu, and they're taking care of themselves the way that they ordinarily would, which usually does not include going to the doctor. So the things that you're looking for are fever, cough, and shortness of breath being the concerning signs that would alert you to call your doctor, call the health department, try to get a telemedicine appointment with a doctor. Those things would alert you to that. But, yes?
Are there any kits available to the doctors here?
Yes, so the CDC has started shipping out the testing kits. I believe that they do have testing kits, at least at some locations here. So that's why you would call the Washington County Health Department, and you would call your primary care doctor, and you would potentially set up a telemedicine appointment, even if it's with a doctor that you're not familiar with. Because between those three things, you should be able to get some idea of whether you can get tested as soon as possible. The other thing to remember if you do start having symptoms is you want to try to wear a mask. You want to minimize the exposure of the rest of your community here. That's critically important in this particular community. And so I don't know if any of you have masks, but I'm sure you have scarves or bandanas or handkerchiefs that can work as a mask for you. You really just want to cover your nose and mouth to make sure that when you cough, when you sneeze, when you talk, you're not having aerosolization of all of those particles, right? So you're catching it in that mask.
And then, do you need to be washing if you're wearing a scarf or a bandana? Do you need to be washing that?
Yes, I would wash it. You can probably use it for the better part of a day as long as it's not getting very wet and uncomfortable for you. But yes, I would be washing those. And so back to your question though, you were asking about living outside the body. It's not going to live outside the body for very long, and the transmission is not very high for the touching an object and then touching your face and getting it that way. It's low incidence of that. It's still possible, so that's one of the reasons why we're washing our hands frequently. But the washing our hands is also because our hands come in contact with the particles in the air. It's not just about touching a surface, it's also about the contact with everything that's in the air. So if you've got cuts on your hand, that means that you've got to be extra careful. Definitely use that moisturizer. If you know you have open wounds on your hand and you've maybe had them for a while, I would get some gloves that are comfortable for you to wear. They don't even necessarily have to be latex gloves though. If you have mittens or winter gloves or something that's comfortable for you, those would also be another layer, another barrier. So we're just trying to think proactively, right? We're trying to minimize our own exposure, we're trying to minimize the exposure of those around us, and we're trying to really check in with our bodies, which is something that not everybody does. So some people will have a little tickle in their throat but not really pay attention to it because maybe it'll go away, and then a day or two later then they have a cough and a fever and they can't ignore it anymore. Listen to the tickle. Listen to it. If you're like, oh, what is that? Say, I need to be more on top of covering my mouth and nose when I go into public places, and I need to stay inside and have warm beverages and rest. Rest is amazing for helping you to recover from things like this. I'd also say that if you have my contact information, please reach out to me if you end up having symptoms. If you don't have my contact information, please write it down now. Do you have pens and papers, all of you? So my name, for those of you that are unfamiliar, is Dr. Tiffany Prado. And I'm an acupuncturist. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And so on the ground in China, I'm sure you're aware, they are using quite a bit of Chinese medicine. They're also using Western medicine. They have a very integrated way of dealing with health concerns. So back to my contact information. It looks like some of you are ready. My phone number is 971 225 0333. And for those of you who would like to email rather than call or text, my email address is, it's the initials for my clinic name, which is Portland Integrative Medicine, so it's PIM at Portland Integrative, with a V, med.com. So if you were to become symptomatic, meaning all of a sudden you have a fever, you may reach out to me as well. I know that sometimes it's difficult to get through to your primary care. I know that sometimes you don't get the information you might need from the health department, and I know sometimes telemedicine can be hard. So I am another resource for you if you become symptomatic. Yes, and Betsy is also a great resource for you. This is my grandmother. She lives in 157. If you have difficulty reaching people and you want to call her and let her know that you're trying to reach me, or you don't have my number and you lost the paper, you can call Betsy and then she can give you my contact information. So since I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, those are the tools that I use. So I don't have prescription medications that I would be prescribing for people, but I do have herbs. And on the ground in China, they are successfully using herbal medicine to treat and cure coronavirus. So I have colleagues who are in China who have been doing some of the translation of the research documents that are coming out of there. So I'm aware of all the various different herbal formulas they've been using for the different types of coronavirus that are showing up, because it looks different in different people, as does the flu, as do colds, as do all respiratory illnesses. So they have certain trends, and then they have variations that are both individual specific and the evolution of the virus, which is happening here. So even though fever, cough, and shortness of breath are the three main signs they're telling people to look for, it could also look different for you. So if it looks different and you're saying, well, I'm sick, but I don't have a fever, so it must not be that, please don't fool yourself into thinking that that's the approach to take. Regardless of whether it is or is not, if you become ill, your immune system strength is lowered, which means you are more susceptible to getting sick. You're also more likely to pass on whatever illness you have if you're not taking precautions. So I'm treating everything I'm seeing like it's the coronavirus, because that's the kind of precaution that I would like people to be taking to make sure that this does not continue to spread. Any more questions so far? I know I'm throwing a lot of information at once. Yes?
Should the servers be wearing gloves, plastic protection or gloves?
So again, I feel like it comes back to, number one, do they have any symptoms? If they do not have any symptoms, I think them being here at work is just fine. If they're washing their hands frequently, which they're all trained as food handlers, which means they know how to do proper procedures for washing their hands, it should be okay. I would imagine that they're just as concerned about becoming ill or spreading it to this community as you all are, because I know they care very much about you. So I'm gonna trust that they're going to be taking appropriate precautions. I will say that I do have some recommendations, and hopefully I can talk to some people here, because I think that leaving food out in a place where it's coming into contact with everyone who walks by is probably not a good idea for right now. So you can also vote with your choices, right? Like, I'm not gonna take the stuff that's been left out, I'm gonna wait for something that's freshly made, for example. And same thing when you're going to grocery stores, if they have samples out, I would avoid the samples. You don't know how many people have come by, how many people have sneezed within 6 feet of those samples. So just really, really thinking about this for everywhere you're going and all the actions you're taking. And it doesn't take too long to get into the habit of thinking about these things. Noticing, oh, I just opened the door with my hand, so I'm gonna make sure I don't fix my hair now that I've opened the door, because that's just gonna spread whatever was on the doorknob to around my face, on my hair. Any other questions about what I've gone over so far?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I started today. When you hit the elevator, you have to hit I'm gonna carry a Kleenex with me to touch the button on the elevator and then whatever floor I want. But I know when we go into the restrooms on the main floor, we don't know, going in, I'm gonna have to keep a Kleenex, but coming out after I wash my hand, I take a napkin and close the door with that.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you my extra precautions when I go into the restroom to wash my hands is, if I know I'm going to wash my hands going in, then I'm okay with opening the door with my hand without some kind of protection, right? Because I know I'm going to walk in, I'm going to wash my hands. If you've been out and about and you're going to use the restroom and you have 30 seconds, I would recommend washing your hands first, then using the bathroom, then washing your hands a second time, then using your lotion, right? And so when you're washing your hands, again, you're doing 20 seconds of washing, 10 seconds of rinsing with warm water. Before you shut off the water, you're getting your paper towel, starting to dry, and using the clumped up paper towel to turn off the water. Same paper towel or a new paper towel can be used to open the door. Hold the door with your foot, drop it in the trash. Okay? Those are the ways that you would be the most careful when you're washing your hands in a public restroom. Even at home, it would be good for you to go over some of these surfaces periodically with whatever kind of disinfecting wipes you have or disinfecting spray, doorknobs, faucets, handles of the commonly used cabinets in your kitchen, the chairs, the arms of chairs that are able to be disinfected, things like that would be good to go over periodically. Also, taking off your shoes when you walk into your apartment, which I know some of you do and some of you don't do. But when you come into your apartment and you're wearing the same shoes that you wore out in public, that means you're tracking everything into your house onto the carpet. If you have animals, then those animals are walking right over all that stuff and getting it onto your lap. So it's just more spread of all the ick, right? We don't want any spread of the ick. So to minimize the spread of the ick, in addition to what we've already talked about, walk in the door, take your shoes off by the door. Leave the shoes that you think you might be wearing by the door so that you can easily slip them on and off and you don't have to worry about that. Yes?
I noticed, I haven't gone to the store in a few days, but I noticed the shelves are empty.
Yes.
Wipes and Kleenex and whatever.
Right.
I have some, like a bottle of peroxide. Would it work if I put in like a little cotton ball, and would peroxide do as good, or
Peroxide.
alcohol would be better?
Peroxide is pretty good. Alcohol would be good too. Some people use vinegar. I don't think vinegar is enough in this case, but peroxide and alcohol are good substitutions for other disinfecting sprays that you might have. Something that's noteworthy though is the reason that hydrogen peroxide is sold in those brown bottles is because it's light sensitive. So if you wanted to spray it, you could pour some into a spray bottle and use the spray bottle to spray it, or put the spray top onto the hydrogen peroxide bottle if it will fit. But once you're done with the spraying, you'll need to return it to the brown bottle because otherwise it won't be active any longer. And the other thing is that people are taking lots of things off the shelves in preparation, like they're taking pantry items, right? So that they could potentially be at home for an extended period and be able to cook for themselves without a problem. So I do think that that is a reasonable idea to think about. What do you have at your home that would help you to survive for an extended period if there were a quarantine, or if we wanted to have some kind of quarantine for this area? If all of a sudden there were a bunch of cases that were in the neighborhood and nobody had it here, they would probably want to have more strict quarantine here. And we don't really know what a quarantine would look like here, but I can tell you from my friends in China who are also practitioners, they've been locked down. They are not permitted to leave their apartment complexes without permission from security. It has been really extreme over there, and they've done a good job of containing it in some ways, and the economy has tanked for them, but that's what they've had to do in order to quarantine people. So if there were some kind of quarantine here, do you have things like rice, some frozen foods? Do you have pasta? Do you have beans, dried lentils? Do you have nuts? Do you have that kind of thing there? If not, maybe you want to make an order from one of the places that will deliver. Costco will deliver. Fred Meyer, I think, from Instacart will deliver. There's a lot of places that will deliver, and find some of these things. You can also talk to your neighbors and say, well, what if we got 25 pounds of rice from Bob's Red Mill and had it delivered, and then we split it up across 6 or 8 people, right? So that each of us has a couple of pounds of rice. You could do things like that as well, and I would encourage you to work together in that manner, because one, you can save money that way, because then you're having one shipment, and then you have to do a little bit of work to divide everything up, but you're all thinking about it, and when you're all thinking about it together, different people will come up with different ideas, so you can work together and brainstorm and have a much more comprehensive plan than you might make on your own. Yeah.
I was frustrated because there isn't any place that you can get wipes or masks or gloves or anything that you're thinking you might need. But I went on the internet today and found that at Amazon, that if I went all the way through the order, some things were going to be delivered today, some things were going to be delivered at the end of April.
Right.
So I just kept going down, because I don't want to wait till the end of April, I want it now. But, so there are things that will be coming for me today that I have tried to find out in the community and cannot get.
Yes. And so Amazon is also sold out of a lot of things. If you try to find masks on Amazon, good luck. People are jacking up the prices, they're not able to deliver for a month. It's insanity right now. But remember, who are the people that need the masks? The people that are already sick, the people who have symptoms, because the kind of mask you would need to wear in order to protect yourself from the air, getting the air in through the mask, is a mask that would seal completely around your nose and mouth. And even the N95 masks are not going to have a perfect seal. You're going to have to make sure it is sealed at all times. So the mask idea is not something you should be promoting for healthy people. You want the masks to be worn, even just a bandana or a scarf or whatever you can make out of what you've got, for the people who have symptoms, so that they don't aerosolize all of the particles as they're talking, breathing, coughing, sneezing, right? So gloves, I think, can be helpful sometimes. But again, if you have gloves, if you've got open cuts on your hand, you could use your winter gloves, you could use mittens, you could use gloves, kitchen gloves that you wash dishes with if you really needed to. You could use Band-Aids that have good protection, sealing protection. Definitely use your moisturizers to try to get that to heal up. The oils that I've brought are really helpful for promoting healing. One of the oils in there is cicatrizing, which means that it helps with cell growth. So if you've got cuts on your hands, please come and talk to me, because I do have things that can probably help heal up those cuts much faster than anything else. Other questions about what we've gone over? Yeah.
A lot of the residents here go out on outings, they go to plays, they're going to movies, they're going to restaurants. Should that be slowed down?
You know, I think that it's a good idea for people to make the decision not to go into major public places right now. I know that sometimes people get caught in a financial little situation. They've already spent the money on this, they don't want to lose their money on it, or some people have spent money and they're going to go to an outing and they don't want to let them down. And so I think it is still going to be a highly individual decision-making process, but I do feel like more and more people are choosing to not go out just because they want to minimize their exposure, and hopefully there's encouragement from the powers that be here for people to minimize their exposure by limiting how much they're going out into public places. I don't really have any control over that whatsoever, but that's why I'm here today and next week to talk about this, because I do feel like it's a better decision for this population to minimize their exposure to the public.
They canceled the movie, or the show they were going to last night.
Mm-hmm. Good, yeah.
Because it was in Lake Oswego.
So there's another thing here that I think is a little bit glossed over with this, which is some of the people who are in positions like the servers here, the food workers here, the cleaning staff here, may be in the kind of situation that they don't have an option. They have to work. They can't just take days off because they have bills. And so I just want to have you think about that for a minute, because I know that sometimes people get really angry when someone comes in and they're obviously sick. And I want you to if you have that rise up in you, think about alternatives. Like, can we provide a mask? Is it actually unsafe for them to be here? Are they really showing signs that they are very sick and should be staying at home? Or do they have something that's probably more like a cold and they've self-diagnosed enough to know that they're safe? I don't think that's a very safe thing to be doing right now. However, I feel sympathy for the population that is unable to just decide they're going to stay home from work. So I don't know what kind of arrangements could be made, but I think that some of the arrangements that could be made, that could be brainstormed within the community, would be, is there potentially a fund that could be made for some of the workers who may need to take a day off because they're ill? Once they're ill, they have a little bit of, you know, if everybody chips in $1, maybe that person can have their wages for that day made up for. Does that make sense? So just thinking about how this is going to impact a certain demographic much differently, because they can't make decisions like that as easily as others might be able to. And so how can we help them, because that helps us in turn, right? Okay, that's lots of information. So if you haven't gone to the CDC's website, the CDC has regular updates that they're making to their website as things change and progress. They have various different travel bans and restrictions going on right now that you may want to look at. And it's important to note that people are now recognizing that California, Oregon, and Washington have community spread of this virus. So they are recommending, I'm sure, to other people, if you've come into contact with someone from Oregon, we don't want you coming here right now, or we want you to self-quarantine for 14 days. It is noteworthy to me that one of the individuals that was on the ship where they were quarantined for 14 days, it wasn't until he was released from that quarantine that he came down with symptoms. And then he was quarantined a second time. And so even though we've got this 14-day idea, it really depends on when you come into contact with it and how long it takes for it to multiply in the system. So 14 days might be reasonable, but again, it's got community spread, so how long, when does the 14 days start and how long does it last? We don't really know right now. We will have more information as time goes on, and I will continue to be a resource for you all. And now I want to talk just a little bit about what I brought in case anybody is interested in these things. So I have made 2 formulas, one of which is an antiviral formula. Again, I'm taking both of these daily prophylactically myself. The antiviral formula, I'm using herbs that I'm able to access, of course, and that are coming to me from these people in China who I am familiar with, who are translating the documents of the researchers who are having success treating it in China. There are also fairly common antiviral herbs that I was already aware of, so it's a modification of an antiviral formula I had already made. That's what I'm taking at a fairly low dosage twice a day, but I'm taking it consistently because any virus that I come into contact with, I want these herbs to fight against. The other formula I'm taking is a fairly common formula for the initial stages of a cold or an upper respiratory infection, and it's a warming formula. So it also strengthens the immune system because our immune system is a heat-mediated process. We need heat for our immune system to function well, and it's going to safely strengthen your immune system because there are some herbs that while they will increase your immune system's function, they can have the effect of strengthening a pathogen if a pathogen has already entered the system. So I've only chosen herbs that will not strengthen a pathogen, but will strengthen the immune system and also warms the body up. And the reason that I want the warming tincture alongside the antiviral tincture is the antiviral tincture is cooling in nature. So I don't know if you've ever had an experience with antibiotics and then maybe some digestive disturbance afterward. It's because antibiotics and antivirals are like a blast of cold air on something that is hot and virulent. So the antiviral tincture is cooling, and I definitely want to have the warming tincture alongside it. I've kept them separate because I feel like that's going to make them last a little bit longer. So those are the two formulas that I have. There's certainly lots of other formulas that I can make for people who have any symptoms, who have specific conditions that are different, or who have a very unusual individual constitution that might require some customization. And then the other thing that I have, again, is the oils, which I'm sure you've seen me use my oils a couple of times already this morning, because I wash my hands probably 50 to 100 times a day on a regular day because of seeing patients and how many times I go in and out of the treatment rooms. So I'm using it very frequently. Those are the things that I have to offer. I certainly can offer more to you. It's definitely helpful for you to do anything you can to improve your immune system's function, which means getting adequate sleep, eating a nutritious diet, making sure you're minimizing your sugar intake, and I would say from a Chinese perspective, we also want to minimize the cold and raw foods that you're consuming. And the reason we're reducing the cold and raw foods, and I know this is somewhat controversial, and you guys have fruit and salad and all that stuff here, so I know this is going against the grain a little bit, but it's because it makes your body work a lot harder to digest it, because your stomach has to rot and ripen the food. So when you're putting something cold or raw into your stomach, you're asking your stomach to get in high gear and run around the block a couple of times to make that to a state where it can actually start to absorb the nutrients. So if the foods that you're choosing are warm and cooked, it's going to be much easier on your digestive system to go ahead and get the nutrients out of it. So I would strongly recommend avoiding drinking cold beverages, eating cold salads, having raw foods, having ice cream. I would avoid the ice cream too, temporarily. Temporarily. You can go back to all the stuff you usually do when we're in the summer months and this is long behind us and we're not so concerned anymore. But that would be my best recommendation from a dietary perspective. Yes?
Doctor, what's your opinion about using echinacea?
Echinacea is a very popular herb.
Now, we use one that's got zinc and vitamin C in it also.
Great. Have you had success with it?
Well, he had a cold this fall and I never got it. And last summer I was told it was one of the worst allergy summers we've had here. And I was told to take it and I did. And in a matter of weeks it began to just kind of fade down.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to step on toes about echinacea. I have personal feelings about echinacea, and I think that it can also be really useful. If you've already used echinacea and it works for you, fantastic, keep using it. Same with elderberry. I love elderberry. Echinacea or elderberry all on their own, to me, are not sufficient by themselves for this kind of a virus, for this kind of an outbreak. So we're looking at numbers, trying to figure out how virulent this virus is, and they're throwing out numbers 15 to 30 to 50 times more virulent than the flu. So that's how much more likely people are to contract it with normal exposure. That's That's astounding. So the elderberry is great. If you've got elderberry on board already, keep taking it. I would take this in addition. That's what I'm doing. I've got elderberry. I've got other things I'm taking at home too when I feel like I need an extra boost. So if you've already got stuff on board for your immune system and it's worked well for you, I don't think you should stop it. I think you should keep going. Zinc is really good, vitamin C is really good, echinacea can be great for people. So things that you're already doing to support yourself, you should definitely keep doing. Don't watch that super late movie just because you're awake. Try to go to sleep, even if you just have the lights out and you're kind of annoyed because you're still awake. Resting is still gonna be better than not resting. And when you're watching a screen, your brain is being activated, it's being stimulated. If it's an exciting movie, your brain is going through those stimulating, exciting things. It doesn't know that you're sitting there on the couch, supposedly resting. Your brain thinks you're going through what's happening in the movie. So choose the things you're doing in the evening specifically to help you to wind down and sleep and rest. Yes?
What about exercising? Is that still good to do?
Exercising is definitely good to do. So you want to be a little more mindful about what kind of exercise you're doing and where you're doing it. Yes, walking is fantastic. If you're walking somewhere out in the community though, you want to have some distance between you and the other people. You want to keep that 6 feet of distance. On a treadmill, fantastic. If you have wipes or a spray or something, when you go down, spray the handles, spray the machine itself so that when you're pressing the buttons, you know that it's already clean. So those are good tips to add to what you're already doing. I know that maybe they have some mats in there for you. If you have your own mat, I would bring your own mat. If you don't have your own mat, I would maybe bring some spray it down, wipe it down afterward, and then spray it afterward too, so that you're leaving it clean for the next person, right? Okay, more questions? Yes?
About what stuff we already have on hand. Talk about astragalus.
So astragalus can be tricky by itself because it's one of the immune tonics that can also strengthen a pathogen if there's a pathogen that's already entered. So I would be cautious about your use of astragalus if you don't have it in combination with other herbs that will help to release the pathogen. I know this gets really tricky when we start talking about the herbs. That's why people study the herbs for many, many years before they start prescribing them. Just know that there are certain immune tonics that are going to also strengthen, that will strengthen anything you put in its path, including a pathogen. So if you have any kind of pathogen or a lingering pathogen or a latent pathogen, it can also strengthen that. So I don't recommend just going out there and saying, well, I looked on the internet and this herb is good for immune system, so I'm gonna go grab it, because it might not be the best choice for right now, okay? But you have my number and you have my email address, and you're welcome to reach out to me. And even if it's, I wanna go to the store and find something, I will talk to you about what the best option is for you. You don't have to buy it from me. I don't care if you buy it from me. I want you to do things that are helpful for your immune system, and I want you guys to keep this community safe, okay? More questions? No? Are we good?
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. And I'll be back next week, Thursday, I think at 11. So if you end up having questions over the course of the next week, go to the CDC's website. You can go to the OHSU's website. You can go to the Washington County Health Department's website, and you can find out information there that may inform your questions. And I have links to people too, and so I do know someone through a patient who works for the health department in Seattle, and they are extremely concerned, and they're not really publicizing how concerned they are, because they don't want to alarm people. They don't want everybody to all of a sudden go into panic. People are already panicking. That's why the shelves are empty right now. There's a good reason that there is some of this preparation in place already, and they're not telling us all the details because they're trying to keep us calm. But this is something we really need to be taking very seriously. So please remember the things that I've said today. If you end up having questions, you've forgotten something I've said, please reach out. talk to the people in the community. Don't just stir the pot and make people afraid, but focus on the things that you can do to keep yourself and your community safe and healthy, okay? All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have one more question?